Did you know that putting certain foods in the fridge can actually make them spoil faster? It sounds strange, right? Most of us grew up believing that the refrigerator is the ultimate tool to keep food fresh. But here's the surprising truth. Some foods actually lose their flavor, texture, and nutrients when stored in the cold. If you've ever taken a bite of a mealy tomato, noticed your potatoes turning oddly sweet, or found your bread drying out way too quickly, your fridge might be the culprit. In fact, storing certain foods in the refrigerator can cause them to mold faster, become tasteless, or even lose their nutritional value, something seniors need to pay extra attention to. This is especially important if you're trying to save money, reduce food waste, or make meal prep easier. And let's be honest, nobody likes tossing out food that was perfectly fine just a few days ago. That's why today, we're busting a major food storage myth and revealing 11 common foods that should never go in the fridge. From fresh produce to pantry staples, we'll break down exactly why refrigeration is the wrong move for these foods and what you should do instead to keep them fresh longer. Some of these may surprise you, so stick around until the end to see if you've been making these storage mistakes. Let's dive in and uncover the 11 foods you should keep out of the fridge, starting with one that almost everyone gets wrong. Tomatoes. Why you should never store it in the fridge. Tomatoes are one of the most commonly misunderstood foods when it comes to storage. Many people automatically place them in the refrigerator, thinking that the cold will help preserve their freshness. However, this is actually one of the worst things you can do to tomatoes. Refrigeration may extend their shelf life slightly, but it comes at a major cost, ruining their texture, flavor, and overall quality. Tomatoes are delicate fruits with a high water content, and they continue to ripen after being harvested. When stored in the fridge, the cold temperature disrupts the natural ripening process, causing undesirable changes. One of the biggest problems is that refrigeration damages the cell structure of the tomato, making the flesh mealy and mushy instead of firm and juicy. This happens because cold temperatures break down the fruit's internal membranes, causing moisture loss and altering its texture. But texture isn't the only issue. Flavor also takes a hit. Tomatoes contain a variety of volatile compounds responsible for their rich, sweet, and tangy taste. When exposed to cold temperatures, below 55 DEGF or 13 DEC, these compounds degrade, significantly dulling the tomato's natural flavors. This is why a refrigerated tomato often tastes bland compared to one that has been left at room temperature to ripen properly. Several scientific studies have confirmed this effect. Researchers have found that chilling tomatoes slows down the activity of key enzymes responsible for their flavor development. Even if you take a tomato out of the fridge and let it warm up again, the damage is already done. The flavor won't fully return. So, if you've ever wondered why store-bought tomatoes lack the vibrant taste of fresh garden tomatoes, refrigeration may be to blame. To keep tomatoes fresh, flavorful, and perfectly textured, always store them at room temperature. Place them in a bowl or on a countertop, ideally in a well-ventilated area. Avoid direct sunlight, which can cause them to over-ripen too quickly. A cool spot in your kitchen, away from heat sources like the stove, is best. If you have unripe tomatoes, you can speed up the ripening process by placing them in a paper bag with a banana or apple. These fruits release ethylene gas, which helps tomatoes ripen more quickly. Once they reach peak ripeness, use them within a few days for the best flavor and texture. What if your tomatoes are already ripe and you're not ready to use them? In this case, refrigeration can be a last resort to slightly extend their lifespan, but only for short periods. If you must refrigerate, place them in the fridge for no more than a couple of days and let them come to room temperature before eating to help restore some of their flavor. Potatoes, why you should never store it in the fridge. Potatoes are a staple in many households, especially for seniors who enjoy hearty, comforting meals. However, one of the biggest mistakes people make is storing them in the refrigerator. While it may seem logical to keep potatoes cold to extend their shelf life, refrigeration actually has the opposite effect. It changes their texture, alters their flavor, and even affects their nutritional value. Potatoes are made up primarily of starch, which reacts poorly to cold temperatures. When stored in the refrigerator, the starch in potatoes begins to break down and convert into sugar at an accelerated rate. This process, known as cold-induced sweetening, causes the potatoes to develop an unpleasantly sweet taste, which can ruin the flavor of your favorite dishes. Instead of the mild, earthy taste you expect from potatoes, refrigerated ones may taste oddly sugary, making them unsuitable for many recipes. The changes don't stop at taste. Texture is also affected. When you cook a potato that has been stored in the fridge, especially by roasting or frying, the excess sugar interacts with heat to cause excessive browning and crisping. This can lead to an unbalanced texture where the outside is overly tough or burned while the inside remains starchy. Worse yet, this process increases the formation of acrylamides, potentially harmful compounds that form when certain foods are cooked at high temperatures. Another problem with refrigeration is that it draws out moisture, causing potatoes to shrivel and become dry. This leads to a grainy or mealy texture when cooked, certainly not the fluffy, smooth, or creamy result you want when making mashed potatoes, baked potatoes, or fries. To keep potatoes fresh, store them in a cool, dark, and dry place. The ideal storage temperature is between 45 degrees 50 DFC, 7D to DC, warmer than a refrigerator but cooler than typical room temperature. A pantry, basement, or cupboard away from direct sunlight and heat sources like the oven is the best choice. Potatoes should also be kept in a well-ventilated container, such as a paper bag, mesh bag, or basket. Avoid plastic bags as they trap moisture and promote sprouting and mold growth. If you notice that your potatoes are sprouting, they're still safe to eat. Just cut off the sprouts before cooking. However, if they become soft, wrinkled, or greenish in color, it's best to discard them. Bonus tip: keep potatoes away from onions. While both need similar storage conditions, onions release gases that cause potatoes to sprout and spoil faster. Onions: why you should never store it in the fridge. Onions are a kitchen essential, adding flavor and depth to countless dishes. However, many people mistakenly store them in the refrigerator, thinking it will keep them fresh for longer. In reality, refrigeration does more harm than good. It alters their texture, promotes mold growth, and reduces their shelf life. If you want your onions to stay crisp, dry, and flavorful, it's time to stop storing them in the fridge. Onions thrive in dry conditions, and the cold, humid environment of a refrigerator disrupts their natural composition. When stored in the fridge, onions absorb moisture, which softens their texture and leads to premature spoilage. Instead of remaining firm and crisp, refrigerated onions become mushy and slimy, making them difficult to chop and cook with. Moisture is also a breeding ground for mold and bacteria, which can quickly cause onions to rot. If you've ever found a soggy, moldy onion in your fridge, refrigeration was likely the culprit. Additionally, onions have a strong aroma that easily spreads to other foods in the refrigerator, making everything from butter to milk take on an unwanted onion-like scent. Another problem with refrigerating onions is that it interrupts their natural drying process. Onions continue to lose moisture over time, but in a fridge, the condensation causes them to become overly damp instead of drying properly. This results in sprouting, which speeds up decay. While sprouted onions are still edible, their taste becomes bitter and their texture becomes softer. To keep onions fresh and flavorful, store them in a cool, dry, and well-ventilated place. The ideal storage method is in a basket, mesh bag, or open container that allows air to circulate around them. A dark pantry, cupboard, or cellar is perfect. Avoid sealing onions in plastic bags, as this traps moisture and speeds up spoilage. If you want your onions to last as long as possible, follow these tips. Keep them away from potatoes. Potatoes release moisture and gases that make onions spoil faster. Store them separately. Hang them in a breathable bag, net bags, or even pantyhose work well to keep onions dry and prevent mold growth. Store cut onions properly. If you've already sliced an onion, refrigerate the leftover portion in an airtight container to prevent it from absorbing moisture and odors. Use within a few days. By storing onions correctly, you'll maintain their firm texture, strong flavor, and long shelf life. So, next time you bring home a bag of onions, skip the fridge and opt for proper pantry storage instead. Garlic. Garlic is a powerhouse ingredient in the kitchen, adding depth and aroma to countless dishes. But if you've been storing your garlic in the refrigerator, you may have noticed something odd: rubbery clothes, bitter flavors, or even premature sprouting. While refrigeration might seem like a logical way to keep garlic fresh, it actually accelerates spoilage and negatively affects its taste and texture. Garlic bulbs are meant to be stored in a dry, well-ventilated environment. When placed in the refrigerator, the cold temperature and excess moisture create the perfect conditions for premature sprouting. Instead of staying firm and pungent, refrigerated garlic cloves develop green shoots quickly. While sprouted garlic is still safe to eat, it tends to have a bitter, less desirable taste which can alter the flavor of your dishes. Refrigeration also affects the texture of garlic. When exposed to cold and humidity, garlic cloves absorb moisture, making them soft, rubbery, and sometimes even moldy. Once the garlic starts to deteriorate, it loses its signature sharp, aromatic flavor and can become mushy and unpleasant to cook with. Additionally, garlic's natural, protective, papery skin helps regulate its moisture levels. When refrigerated, the skin can start to break down, making the cloves more susceptible to mold and decay. If you've ever found a sticky, discolored, or musty-smelling garlic clove in your fridge, the cold and moisture were to blame. To keep garlic fresh, flavorful, and long-lasting, store it in a cool, dry, and well-ventilated place. The best way to do this is by keeping whole bulbs in a mesh bag, wire basket, or a paper bag to allow for proper airflow. A pantry or kitchen counter, away from direct sunlight and moisture, is ideal. Here are some key garlic storage tips. Avoid plastic bags or sealed containers. These trap moisture, leading to mold growth and premature spoilage. Keep bulbs intact until use. Once you break a garlic bulb into individual cloves, the shelf life shortens significantly. Whole bulbs can last up to 3 months, while separated cloves should be used within 10 to 14 days. Store cut or peeled garlic properly. If you've already peeled or chopped garlic, store it in an airtight container in the refrigerator, but use it within a few days. For longer storage, minced garlic can be frozen in olive oil or as a paste in ice cube trays. By storing garlic correctly, you'll preserve its bold flavor, crisp texture, and long shelf life. So, ditch the fridge and keep your garlic in a dry, ventilated space. It's the best way to ensure that every clove stays fresh and delicious. Bread. Why you should never store it in the fridge. Bread is a staple in nearly every household, but if you've been keeping it in the refrigerator to prevent mold, you might be making a big mistake. While refrigeration slows down mold growth, it actually causes bread to go stale much faster, making it dry, crumbly, and unappetizing. If you want to keep your bread fresh and soft for as long as possible, the fridge is the last place it should be. Bread is made primarily of starch, and starch is highly sensitive to temperature changes. When bread is stored in the refrigerator, a process called starch retrogradation occurs. This means that the starch molecules, which are gelatinized during baking, start to crystallize again much more quickly in cold temperatures. As a result, the bread loses moisture and becomes stale at an accelerated rate, often in just a day or two. You might have noticed that refrigerated bread feels dry and tough, even if it's still relatively fresh. That's because cold air draws moisture out of the bread, leaving it hard and flavorless. Even toasting it won't fully restore its original softness. In contrast, bread stored at room temperature maintains its fluffy texture for longer. While refrigeration does slow down mold growth, most commercially packaged breads contain preservatives that naturally extend their shelf life at room temperature. If you buy fresh bakery bread without preservatives, refrigeration still isn't the best solution. Freezing is a much better option if you need to store bread long term. To keep bread fresh and delicious, store it at room temperature in a bread box, paper bag, or cloth bag. This prevents excessive moisture buildup while keeping the loaf from drying out too quickly. If you don't have a bread box, you can keep bread in its original packaging and store it in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight. Here are the best bread storage tips. Use a bread box. It balances airflow and humidity to keep bread soft while preventing mold. Avoid plastic bags for fresh bread. While store-bought bread comes in plastic packaging, fresh bakery bread should be stored in a paper or cloth bag to prevent excess moisture. Freeze for long-term storage. If you don't plan to finish a loaf within a few days, slice it and freeze it. You can take out slices as needed and toast them directly from the freezer. Bread stored this way can last up to 3 months without losing its quality. By storing bread the right way, you'll enjoy soft, fresh, and delicious loaves for longer, without the dry, stale texture that comes from refrigeration. So, next time you bring home a loaf of bread, skip the fridge and store it properly instead. Honey, why you should never store it in the fridge. Honey is often considered nature's perfect sweetener. It never spoils, has natural antibacterial properties, and stays fresh for years. However, if you've been storing your honey in the refrigerator, you might have noticed it turning thick, cloudy, or even grainy. While refrigeration doesn't make honey unsafe to eat, it alters its texture and makes it harder to use. If you want to keep your honey smooth, golden, and easy to drizzle, keeping it out of the fridge is essential. Unlike many other foods, honey is naturally self-preserving due to its low water content and high sugar concentration. This unique composition prevents bacteria and mold from growing, meaning honey doesn't require refrigeration to stay fresh. However, when honey is stored in the fridge, the cold temperature speeds up the crystallization process. This causes the sugars in honey to form solid granules, making it thick, grainy, and difficult to pour. While crystallized honey is still safe to eat, its texture becomes gritty rather than smooth and silky. Refrigeration also alters the flavor profile of honey. When chilled, honey loses some of its floral and aromatic notes, making it taste less vibrant. For those who use honey in tea, on toast, or in recipes, this can affect the overall enjoyment of its natural sweetness. The best way to store honey is at room temperature in a tightly sealed container. A kitchen pantry or cupboard away from direct sunlight and heat is ideal. Keeping honey in a glass jar or its original container ensures it maintains its liquid consistency for as long as possible. Here are a few key honey storage tips. Keep the lid tightly closed. Honey absorbs moisture from the air, which can lead to fermentation over time. Use a glass jar or plastic squeeze bottle. Avoid storing honey in metal containers, as metal can cause it to oxidize and develop off flavors. If honey crystallizes, don't throw it away. Simply place the jar in warm, not boiling water and stir gently to return it to its smooth liquid state. By storing honey properly, you can enjoy its rich flavor and smooth texture for years to come. So, skip the fridge and keep your honey in the pantry where it belongs. Coffee. Why you should never store it in the fridge. For many seniors, a good cup of coffee is a daily ritual. Whether you prefer freshly ground beans or pre-ground coffee, proper storage is key to maintaining its rich aroma and bold flavor. But if you've been keeping your coffee in the refrigerator, thinking it will stay fresh longer, you're actually ruining its taste and quality. Refrigeration exposes coffee to moisture and odors, leading to a stale, unpleasant brew. Coffee is highly absorbent, meaning it soaks up moisture and surrounding odors quickly. When stored in the fridge, coffee beans and grounds absorb condensation, causing them to lose their natural oils and flavors. This results in a dull, flat taste, robbing your coffee of its full-bodied richness. Another major issue is that coffee acts like a sponge for smells. Your refrigerator is filled with a mix of food odors, onions, cheese, leftovers, which coffee can easily absorb. The last thing you want is a cup of coffee that tastes slightly like last night's garlic pasta. Additionally, frequent temperature changes when taking coffee in and out of the fridge cause condensation, making the beans or grounds damp. This speeds up the degradation process, leading to faster spoilage. To keep coffee fresh and flavorful, store it in an airtight container at room temperature, away from light, heat, and moisture. The best storage method depends on whether you're using whole beans or ground coffee. Whole beans. Store them in a dark, airtight container. Ceramic or stainless steel is best, in a cool, dry pantry. Buy in small batches and grind only what you need to maximize freshness. Ground coffee. If you buy pre-ground coffee, keep it sealed in its original bag, if resealable, or transfer it to an airtight container. Use it within 1 to 2 weeks for the best taste. Never store coffee in the fridge or freezer unless it's in a completely airtight bag that won't allow moisture to seep in. Even then, it's best to store in small portions and only for long-term preservation. By keeping coffee out of the fridge and properly stored, you'll enjoy a fresher, more flavorful brew every morning. So, if you want the perfect cup of coffee, ditch the fridge and store your beans or grounds correctly. Avocados. Why you should never store it in the fridge. Avocados are a creamy, versatile fruit that's beloved by many for their healthy fats and delicious flavor. However, if you've been storing your avocados in the refrigerator, you might have noticed that they don't ripen properly, or worse, they turn brown and mushy. While refrigeration can be useful once avocados are fully ripe, it's not ideal for unripe avocados. Storing them in the fridge too early can prevent them from ripening at all, which is a common mistake. Avocados are a unique fruit that continue to ripen after being harvested. When stored at room temperature, they ripen gradually, becoming soft and ready to eat. However, when placed in the refrigerator while still unripe, the cold temperatures slow down the natural ripening process, which can leave them firm and difficult to eat. This means that your avocado may stay rock hard for days, even weeks, if it's kept too cold. In addition to affecting the ripening process, refrigeration also alters the texture and flavor of an avocado once it is ripe. The cold can cause the fruit's flesh to turn brown more quickly, and the texture may become watery and mushy. The rich, buttery flavor that you expect from an avocado becomes dull and less appealing when exposed to cold temperatures. The ideal place to store an unripe avocado is at room temperature, typically on your kitchen counter or in a fruit bowl, away from direct sunlight. If you need to speed up the ripening process, place the avocado in a paper bag with a banana or apple. These fruits release ethylene gas, which helps trigger ripening. Depending on how firm the avocado is when you first get it, it should ripen within a few days at room temperature. Once the avocado is ripe and soft to the touch, it can be placed in the fridge to slow down the ripening process and extend its shelf life for a few more days. However, the key here is to refrigerate only ripe avocados. If you've cut an avocado in half and have leftovers, store the unused half in the fridge, covering it tightly with plastic wrap or placing it in an airtight container to prevent browning. You can also squeeze a little lemon or lime juice on the exposed flesh to help preserve the color and flavor. Bonus tip, if you find yourself with overripe avocados, you can freeze them. Simply scoop the flesh into an airtight container or freezer bag. When you're ready to use them, they're perfect for smoothies or guacamole, though the texture may change slightly after freezing. By storing your avocados properly at room temperature and only refrigerating once they're ripe, you'll enjoy them at their best, smooth, flavorful, and perfect for every meal. So next time you buy an avocado, keep it out of the fridge until it's ready to eat. Apples, why you should never store it in the fridge. Apples are a refreshing and nutritious snack that many seniors enjoy, offering a good dose of fiber, vitamins, and antioxidants. However, despite their popularity, one of the most common mistakes people make is storing apples in the refrigerator. While apples can technically be refrigerated, this is not the best storage method to preserve their flavor and texture. In fact, refrigeration can cause apples to lose their crispness, flavor, and even accelerate their decay. Apples, like many fruits, are best stored at room temperature until they reach the optimal ripeness. When placed in the fridge, apples can lose their natural flavor and aroma due to the chilling injury that occurs in cold temperatures. At temperatures below 40 DGF, 4 DGC, apples' texture starts to change. They become soft, mealy, and less appealing to eat. The cold also causes apples to lose some of their sweetness, and they may develop a more acidic taste. Another reason to avoid refrigerating apples is that the cold environment suppresses the release of ethylene gas, the natural compound that helps fruits ripen. Storing apples in the fridge means they ripen more slowly, and if they're already ripe when placed inside, they can become mushy or overripe. Additionally, apples produce ethylene gas, which can cause other fruits and vegetables nearby to ripen and spoil faster, so if you keep them in the fridge with other produce, you may unintentionally speed up spoilage. The best way to store apples is at room temperature in a cool, dry area. A countertop, fruit bowl, or pantry is ideal. Keep apples away from direct sunlight, as it can cause them to ripen too quickly. If you have a large batch of apples and want to extend their shelf life, you can store them in a ventilated container or a paper bag to ensure proper airflow. This way, apples can stay fresh for several days or even a week. If you have unripe apples, they can be left on the counter to ripen until they reach the desired firmness. Once ripe, you can place them in the fridge if necessary, but it's best to consume them within a few days to ensure the best taste and texture. Bonus tip: if you buy apples in bulk, they should be checked regularly for blemishes or bruises. Apples that have imperfections should be eaten or stored separately, as they can cause the rest to spoil faster. By storing apples at room temperature and only refrigerating them once they are fully ripe, you can enjoy crisp, juicy, and flavorful apples for a longer period. So, skip the fridge and let your apples ripen naturally on the counter. Bananas, why you should never store it in the fridge. Bananas are one of the most popular fruits in the world, offering a delicious and nutritious snack. However, many people make the mistake of storing them in the refrigerator thinking it will preserve their freshness. While it might seem like a good idea to keep them cold, refrigeration actually has a detrimental effect on bananas, causing them to ripen improperly and change in texture and flavor. If you want to enjoy bananas at their best, keep them out of the fridge. Bananas are tropical fruits that thrive in warm temperatures. When stored in the fridge, bananas undergo chilling damage. The cold causes their skin to darken and turn black much faster than it would at room temperature. Although the fruit inside may still be edible, the change in color can make it less appealing. Refrigeration also slows down the natural ripening process, leading to uneven ripening and an unappealing texture. When bananas are placed in the fridge before they are fully ripe, their skin darkens, but the flesh inside may remain underripe, firm, and starchy. This means the banana could be harder to eat, lacking the smooth, creamy consistency you expect. Moreover, bananas are high ethylene producers, a gas that speeds up the ripening of nearby fruits. When placed in the fridge, bananas will not release as much ethylene gas, which impairs their natural ripening process. This leads to inconsistent texture and ripeness when you eventually take them out of the fridge. To preserve bananas and enjoy them at their best, store them at room temperature. Hang them on a banana hook or place them in a fruit bowl away from direct sunlight. A counter or pantry is ideal as it provides a warm environment for bananas to ripen evenly. Keeping them separated from other fruits will prevent them from ripening too quickly. If you want to slow the ripening process of bananas, once they've reached your desired ripeness, you can place them in the fridge, but only after they're fully ripe. The skin will darken, but the fruit inside will remain fresh and edible for several extra days. Just be sure to enjoy them before they start to over-ripen and turn mushy. Bonus tip, if you find yourself with too many ripe bananas that you can't eat in time, freeze them. Peel the bananas and place them in a sealed container or freezer bag. Frozen bananas are perfect for smoothies, banana bread, or even a frozen snack. By keeping bananas at room temperature and only refrigerating them after they are fully ripe, you'll ensure they stay sweet, creamy, and delicious for longer. So don't make the mistake of chilling your bananas. Store them on the counter for the best results. Olive oil. Why you should never store it in the fridge. Olive oil is a staple in many kitchens due to its rich flavor and health benefits. Whether you use it for cooking, drizzling over salads, or dipping bread, proper storage is key to maintaining its quality. If you've been storing your olive oil in the fridge, you may have noticed that it becomes cloudy and solidifies, which can be misleading. While it may seem like refrigerating olive oil is a good way to preserve it, doing so actually harms its flavor, texture, and shelf life. Olive oil is best stored at room temperature, in a cool, dry place, away from direct light and heat. When stored in the fridge, olive oil becomes too cold and can start to solidify and become cloudy due to its natural waxes and fats. While this is harmless, it alters the oil's texture and makes it more difficult to use. Once removed from the fridge, it will return to its normal liquid state, but the process can be inconvenient, and the oil may lose some of its delicate flavor. Refrigerating olive oil can also impact its taste. When olive oil solidifies, the volatile compounds responsible for its distinct aroma and flavor are weakened. This means that your olive oil may not taste as fresh or as rich once it has been chilled. Fresh olive oil has a fruity, grassy flavor with a subtle pepperiness that can be masked by refrigeration. Furthermore, exposing olive oil to cold temperatures for extended periods can cause it to oxidize more quickly when returned to room temperature. Oxidation is a process that occurs when oils react with air, leading to rancidity, which results in an off taste. The longer you store olive oil in the fridge, the more likely it is to deteriorate once brought back to a warmer environment. To keep olive oil fresh and flavorful, store it in a cool, dark place, but not the fridge. A pantry or kitchen cabinet is ideal, as long as it's away from heat sources like stoves or sunlight. Olive oil should be kept in dark glass bottles or tins that protect it from light, which can also degrade its quality over time. If the oil is exposed to light, it can become rancid more quickly and lose its flavor and health benefits. Here are a few tips for storing olive oil properly. Avoid plastic containers. These can cause the oil to oxidize faster. Instead, use dark glass bottles or metal tins. Seal tightly. Olive oil should be kept in an airtight container to prevent exposure to oxygen, which can lead to rancidity. Check the expiration date. Olive oil has a shelf life of about 18 to 24 months from the date of bottling. It's best to use it within this time frame to ensure optimal flavor and freshness. If you've already bought more olive oil than you can use, it's best to store smaller amounts in a container that you use frequently, leaving the rest in a larger, sealed container. If you live in a particularly warm climate, you can store olive oil in the fridge for short periods to prevent it from going rancid, but make sure to bring it back to room temperature before using it. By keeping olive oil away from the fridge and in the right conditions, you can enjoy its rich flavor and health benefits for much longer. So, next time you buy a bottle, make sure to store it properly to preserve its taste and quality.